Right. So it's only when it comes to women's orgasms we divide them by the point of stimulation and declare one better than the other.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode. I am here with Laurie Mintz, who I mentioned back in episode 5 about the clitoris. So if you haven't listened to that one, go listen to that one. But either way, you're in for a little bit of a treat here. We're going to get into the orgasm gap and whatever else we need to fix to support the pleasure of vulva owners everywhere. But first, we have our review of the week. So I have a new podcast friend that I met at Podfest Global who mentioned that ratings and reviews of her show are her new love language. So the same holds true for me, totally stealing that from her. So our review this week says, Heather's witty style and no-nonsense approach is what makes this podcast a personal favorite for me. You learn in an entertaining and totally not intimidating way. I've subscribed and plan on listening to every episode. So what I love about this is the subscribing part. So you want to make sure not to miss it. New episodes come out on Monday. You can subscribe or follow at the top of your podcast app. And we also want to let you know that there's actually going to be some incentive as well. So if you hear your review read on the show, reach out and we'll actually send you a free bundle of books from my Amazon storefront, which includes Laurie's book, Becoming Clitoris. So very fun. So let me officially introduce our guest, Laurie. Laurie Mintz is an award-winning college professor. She currently teaches psychology of human sexuality to hundreds of students a year at the University of Florida and has over 20 years of experience working with private clients on sexual issues. Dr. Mintz has received numerous professional awards and is a fellow of the American Psychological Association. She has published over 50 research studies, writes a Psychology Today blog, and has been quoted in many outlets, including Cosmopolitan, Women's Day, Prevention, Women's Health, Men's Health, CNN.com, Oprah.com, and the Huffington Post. You can find more about Laurie at drlauriemintz.com. All right. Well, welcome, Laurie. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a great honor.
Oh, thank you. I have to say, when my podcast launched and I tagged you on Instagram and then you're like, oh my God, I'd love to be a guest on the show. It like made my week that week. And I was so excited because you have done so much amazing work in the field and I think important work that people still don't know enough about. So I'm excited to talk about it today.
That's great. Thank you so much.
All right. So I'm curious, how did you get on this path? I love to just find people's backgrounds because we're in a pretty interesting field that there's not a ton of people. I think it's growing, but there's not a ton of us yet. So how did you wind up in this field?
It was it was not a purposeful route. I grew up in an unusually sex positive household, like very unusual. I could tell some hysterical stories about my mother. In fact, if we want to circle back.
Yeah,
so
I would hate that.
Okay. So I was always really comfortable with the topic. Anyway, I went to grad school, became a professor, a psychologist, a therapist, a researcher. And for many, many years, I researched eating disorders.
Oh.
Yeah, that was my thing. And, you know, people with eating disorders have generally poor body image. Poor body image is related to difficulty relaxing and letting go sexually, right? Because you're like contorting your body in ways that won't be seen. And so I always would talk to my clients about sex, but based on just sort of general information, not deep training. And then I got to a point in my career where I sort of had to be honest with you, I had an existential crisis. I was really sick of eating disorders. And I was also sick of writing research articles that, to be honest, it's like only other researchers saw. And I felt like there was a better way to have a positive impact in the world. And so I thought, I love to write, but I don't really like the research. What do I want to write? And to be completely transparent, at that point in time, I had lost my own sex drive. I had 2 little kids, an intense job, some health issues. And every friend I talked to was like, yeah, me too, me too, me too, me too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because we were all in this similar, really difficult, high stress life stage. And so I thought, well, everybody I know has lost their sex drive. I want to write about that. So I literally just took a lot of time to do a very deep dive into the treatment and research literature. And then I wrote my first self-help book, A Tired Woman's Guide to Passionate Sex.
Mm-hmm.
And then the scientist in me clicked in, and I had like, oh my God, I put a book out there in the world. What if it's not helpful? What if it's even harmful? I kind of freaked. And I was lucky to be in an academic institution with grad students, so I couldn't get involved because of research ethics and bias. But I asked some students, would you want to run a randomized clinical trial on my book? And I discovered there was a whole area of research on the efficacy of self-help books. So anyway, I had students run a bunch of trials, and then I got more and more and more trained and more immersed in the field. Then I took a job. I was at the University of Missouri at the time. And because I took a job at the University of Florida, and the reason I took the job is they didn't have an undergrad human sex class. Started teaching that. And that's when I got really enthralled with the orgasm gap, not just the statistics, but the pain behind the numbers from my students. And I started teaching to female orgasm, closing the gap. And I'd get notes like, thanks to your class, I'm orgasmic. Thanks to your class, my girlfriend's orgasmic. And I thought, I want to write this up for beyond my class. And hence was born Becoming Clitorate. And now all I do and I never get sick of it, is write about, talk about, teach about, do therapy around sex. And I still feel like there's so much I don't know. I love the field because every day I learn something new. There's so much to learn.
I couldn't agree more. Sometimes I'm like, wow, I'm supposed to be like an expert on this stuff, but I feel like I'm just scratching the surface.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much to know.
Yeah. Can you break it down for people who maybe don't know, what is the orgasm gap?
Absolutely. So first of all, let me define some terms. I'm going to be talking about cisgender women and cisgender men. So, cisgender women are people born with vaginas and assigned a sex of female at birth who identify as women. Cisgender men, born with a penis, assigned male at birth, identify as men. And I think it's really important to say that because if we don't, we linguistically erase non-gender conforming and trans folks. But what I'm about to talk about pertains to cisgender individuals because that's where the research is, and also that's where the problem is. So from the little research we have, but the orgasm gap is the consistent finding in the scientific literature that when cisgender women get it on with cisgender men, the women are having way fewer orgasms than the men. Just a few little striking statistics. In one study, 39% of women versus 91% of men said they usually orgasm during a sexual encounter. Like, whoa, what a gap.
Wow.
But that study didn't ask the context of the sex. Subsequent research, tells us it's biggest in first-time hookup sex, massive. In the study I conducted, 55% of men versus 59% of men versus 10% of women. Gets smaller in friends with benefits. It gets smaller in relationship sex, but it rarely even closes altogether. In one study, 68 versus 95% of men said they orgasmed during their last instance of relationship sex. So just to throw a little bit more out there, people say, well, of course that's true. Women's bodies are difficult, elusive, hard to make orgasm. But other stats tell us that's not true. When alone, 94 to 95% of women orgasm easily and within 4 minutes.
Wow.
And when women have sex with other women, they're more likely to orgasm. This study came out after my book, but it's striking. This was a study of bisexual women. So same woman, same body. They hooked up with women and they hooked up with men.
Okay.
If their first time hookup partner was a woman, they said they usually orgasmed 64% of the time.
Okay.
If their first time hookup partner was a man, 7% of the time.
Wow, I
Same
had not
woman,
heard that one.
same body. So what does it tell us? The orgasm gap isn't about our bodies. It's about culture and the way we do heterosexual sex.
That one kind of blows me away. I also wonder if there's an element of like comfort level.
I mean, I think there's a lot to it because when with other women, you might not have that fear of sexual coercion or assault.
Mm-hmm.
You also may have the comfort to say, how do you like to be pleasured?
Yeah.
Because you need to ask.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's like you're less worried, maybe less body monitoring, the male
Mm-hmm.
gaze whole thing. But I also
Mm-hmm.
think a big part of it is that the way we do heterosexual sex, foreplay just to get her ready for intercourse, male ejaculation, sex over. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's not an equal valuing of clitoral stimulation, which is most women's most reliable route to orgasm, as
Yep.
there is penile stimulation.
And one of the things that came up in your book, and that I think you were also associated with the Peanut app, but I did the pods on the Peanut app for a while. And so, a lot of people were asking me, oh, well, how do I have a real orgasm? Meaning from penetration. And I was like, okay, let's back it up a little bit here. But do you think that plays in at all
I
too?
think that's the hugest part of it. And
Yeah.
I cannot believe it's 2023 and we're still having this conversation that there is some ideal way to orgasm and it's through penetration, yet that's not the reality. The vagina and the penis are not analogous organs. The clitoris and the penis are.
Yes.
And only 4 to 18% of women orgasm from just penetration. But yet we have this myth out there that that's the right way to orgasm.
I know, so goofy.
It's awful. And I just literally got an email. This person said I could share it without
Okay, cool.
their name. They said that they read my book and they tried to get their partner to read the book, but their partner wouldn't because he kept insisting that if she could just relax, she would have, quote, the right type of orgasm.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
dump
And
him.
yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's still this myth that's like, and I also hate this narrative of like those few women who can are lucky. Like it still perpetuates
Yeah.
this whole thing of like, I mean that like, and she wrote me, she was like, just teach me to do it the right way. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, I'm 5 feet. Like, can you teach me to be 5'4"? Like,
I think what you're bringing up is so important in the sense that, there's not like a hierarchy of like good orgasms and better orgasms and best orgasms. And like, you're somehow less than or like deficient if you're not having what we've culturally deemed as the better orgasm, because there's also, I mean, at least not that I'm aware of, there's no proof that like it's a more powerful or a better orgasm or that there's more pleasure being experienced. And so much of that is subjective anyways. So it's like,
yes, that hierarchy drives me crazy. If you orgasm from penetration, you're on top.
right.
Penetration plus clitoral stimulation next, just clitoral stimulation. It's like this
so
ridiculous. Yeah. And we don't, without getting into all the nitty gritty, right? We don't even know if there are different types of orgasms. Like there's different theories, different science. But the bottom line is this drives me crazy too. We don't break men's orgasms down by the type of stimulation. We don't say, did you have a blowjob orgasm or an intercourse orgasm?
Right.
A prostate orgasm,
I mean, it's so goofy because I've also had orgasms in my sleep. So what does that count as?
A sleep orgasm, I guess.
It's like none of the above, all of the above. Maybe the whole thing's mental anyway. Like, I don't know.
Right. So it's only when it comes to women's orgasms, we divide them by the point of stimulation and declare one better than the other.
Right. But yeah, I do. Yeah, I don't know. It's fascinating. I think it's just a bunch of made up stuff. So I'm glad we're kind of debunking that right now. One thing you said I wanted to go back to. So you were saying the vagina is not analogous to the penis, the clitoris is. Can you break that down for people? Because I'm not sure if they'll.
Yeah. So when we develop in the embryo, the penis and the clitoris are analogous organs. So for example, the inner and the vulva too, the whole vulva, which is the outside area of the vagina of the women's genitals. That also drives me crazy how we call our entire genitals a vagina. And by doing so we're really linguistically erasing the part of ourselves that gives us the most pleasure.
Right.
We're calling our genitals by the part that's most useful to men than women ourselves. And let me explain that. So The vulva is the outside area, and it contains all the touch-sensitive nerve endings. And the clitoral hood is analogous to the foreskin of the penis if it's not removed.
Right. I think a lot of people probably don't know they have a clitoral hood. So that's the part that covers the outside of the clitoris that you can see, in case people are wondering.
Yes. And then under that is the glands of the clitoris, which is like so densely packed with nerve endings in a small amount of space that most can't touch it directly. It's painful. That's analogous to the head of the penis. The inner lips, which are an underrated sexual organ, are analogous to the shaft of the penis. And all those parts are chock full of touch-sensitive nerve endings and erectile tissue. In terms of the vagina, the opening in the inner third also have touch-sensitive nerve endings, but the inner 2/3 have pressure-sensitive nerve endings.
Yeah.
Explaining why some people like the feeling of something thick after they're aroused, and also explaining why we can wear Tampax and not feel them. There are no touch-sensitive nerve endings in the vagina. So, yes, some people say they orgasm from thrusting of a penis, and there's a lot of theories why. Could be that the inner lips are pulling on the clitoral hood in just the right way. It could be the clitoral bulbs that surround the vagina that are being stimulated, which is why some people say no matter where the stimulation occurs, it's all clitoral. Now, other people argue with that, but the bottom line is we have to stop thinking the vagina and the penis together, even though they do go together during intercourse.
Yeah, we're not
they're not analogous organs.
Right. And so, I mean, because basically when babies are developing, there's a point in development where it's all the same, and then the hormones influence kind of which direction it goes. But I think the way you're explaining it is so helpful for people. And I think people have already gotten so much value that they probably didn't know. I mean, even just that, you know, that the outer third has more touch sensitivity, the inner 2/3, it's just pressure. So the more I think people can really understand it, the better. One of the things that also came up when I was reviewing your book was it was a part where you had just blocked out a little section and you're like, oh yeah, like, you know, there's a few different sources about like attachment points, I think, of the clitoral hood maybe. And it was like you had 3 different sources and they said different things. It was like, oh, it attaches in one place, it attaches in 2 places. And you were saying that even the source you most trusted was actually wrong. And it took you and your assistant looking at your own genitals to be like, no, there's 2 points.
Exactly.
So like this just like really, really speaks to the state of knowledge, specifically the lack of knowledge, even amongst quote unquote experts, researchers, professionals. So what do you think is going on there? Like, why don't people know more?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. That was such an upsetting period of time in writing the book because I kept I couldn't get right information.
Yeah.
And I thought, I can't write this book. It means I just don't know anything. I was like, gonna stop writing. I wrote my editor and she's the one, she said, the fact that there's this misinformation and you can't figure it out is the reason we need the book. But it's like, the internal structure of the clitoris was just mapped for the first time in 2005 with MRI technology. We have not been studying women's sexuality for very long. And so it's really still at its infancy, and there's still so much confusion that steeped through it. And I would say there's also still some kind of male-centric views and ways of researching, that go through it. I think we're making huge progress, but I think there's so much we don't know, which, but that's why it's important for people to know what they can know, like take a mirror, identify your parts. Yeah. And the other thing, most people know it intuitively, but they need it pointed out. Like when women masturbate, 2 studies show that less than 2% do so by putting something inside their vagina exclusively.
Really? Oh, exclusively. Yeah.
Exclusively.
Okay. That makes sense.
Exclusively. The rest use external alone or external combined. Yet, so there's this disconnect. Women know how to do it alone. Yeah. But then they get with male partners and they think they're supposed to orgasm a different way, exclusively through penetration.
And I do think this is an issue for humans regardless of gender too. Like, I think that for the cis women that I work with, sometimes there's a sense of, oh, well, I feel like I'm going to take too long, or that body consciousness that you mentioned, or, you know, depending on upbringing, there's sometimes a sense of like, this is sort of my wifely duty, or this is, you know, supposed to be for the man. And so I think that that's part of what's going on. And also, we're not taught the language to communicate our needs. And I think even for myself, sometimes we just, you know, when it's our own body, we're getting that instant feedback. But to then try and like break that down for someone else and communicate it can be tough. And again, not something we're taught to do. And then I think for a male partner, I mean, some guys that I've worked with are like, you know, boyfriends of clients I've had who have, you know, come in for a session or something. Sometimes there is the idea that sex should just be easy, or if it's like good sex, it should just be easy. And they shouldn't really have to go through this like efforting or like learning curve or any of that. Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said.
Okay.
And also, like, it's not that it's easier for men, it's that we revolve the encounter around what's easier for men. You know, I often say the stimulation men get from intercourse, from masturbation, resembles intercourse. The stimulation women get doesn't resemble it at all. And so we're revolving the encounter around the men's most reliable route to orgasm, and add on top of that body image self-consciousness, genital self-consciousness, no skills or training in general or sexual communication.
I know.
Of course it's not going to be easy, but in the movies, they really dupe us. Everything is easy. Everybody's clothes come off. There's no awkwardness.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows what to do. Everybody
they never talk about it. They never say, what do you like?
And then they all have orgasms, mostly from penetration.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love a movie where they're like, what are you into? What's going to do it for you?
Yes, that's such a good point. Like, we're seeing a little bit more of portrayal of clitoral stimulation, or at least implied.
Yep.
But we don't have much sexual communication being portrayed. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Because people, I think it's almost implied that it's going to make it awkward, or it's going to like kill the mood, and really doesn't have to. So I hope someone listening will put that into a show.
Absolutely. Some producer out there.
Yeah.
Make
some
a
producer
show.
out there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Laurie and I are available for consultation.
Totally.
But so I guess, how do people, because like some of this is pretty sad, you know, some of this is like, oh man, this is like where we're at. So what's kind of the positive side? Like, what can people do to at least start rectifying this in their own sex life?
Yeah. So, I mean, it is pretty sad, but I think conversations like these help.
Yeah,
you know, and I really encourage people, once you see, you can't unsee, and start calling out images when you're with your friends, like, and you're watching a sex scene together, like, hey, that's unrealistic, you know. But in terms of individually, there's like several steps people can take. I'll run through them really fast, and then we can circle back to any. Cool. The first is know your own anatomy, which we started to talk about. Take a mirror, look at yourself, read about it. Then the second step is the sex organ between your ears. You've got to think sex positive thoughts when you're not having sex, which means like no more slut shaming yourself, no more like sex is for him versus me attitude. And also when you are having a sexual encounter, mindfulness, putting your mind and body in the same place. That's sex's best friend. And in fact, you can't have an orgasm when you're monitoring, when you're thinking. You have to be in your body. Love that. And then, of course, sexual communication, talking about sex before, during, after, talking about what you need. And then changing the scripts. No more foreplay just to get him ready, her ready, intercourse, sex over. Part of why lesbian sex is also more orgasmic is there's a more turn-taking style. I pleasure you, then you pleasure me, rather than trying to achieve these mythical orgasms at the same time through the same act. So turn-taking, oral sex during which she orgasms, maybe intercourse where he does, or enough fooling around that intercourse is pleasurable versus painful, then the vibrator. Or use your own, if you want to try to orgasm during the same act, like intercourse, use your own hands, use a vibrator. It is no less sex if you have to touch yourself, because like you were saying, you have immediate feedback. And that can be very erotic to pleasure yourself during intercourse. So those are the steps that one can take to, to change to close the orgasm gap in one's own bedroom,
Yeah,
in one's own life.
absolutely.
But it doesn't mean every sexual encounter should be orgasmic for both. It's okay. Once in a while, only you come. Once in a while, only they come. It doesn't have to be equally amazing for both people
Right.
all the time. And the goal to have an orgasm makes one less likely. Oh, and I left out the most important
Oh.
step. Oh,
What is it?
masturbate.
Oh, yeah.
Masturbation is the most empirically supported technique for a woman to learn what she likes. So pleasure yourself, hands, vibrator, and then know what you like. And then with communication and changing of the scripts, most essential but underutilized advice, get the same type of stimulation with a partner that you do alone. So work with your mind, know your body, work with your mind, masturbate, communicate, and change the scripts.
That's like really, really good advice.
Oh,
so
good.
I hope everybody's taking note of that. I mean, the knowing your anatomy thing too, I've thought about. I recently went to pelvic floor physical therapy, and I was talking with the provider about like every woman should just come in. I'm like, can we make this a thing? Every woman should come in and be able to like learn about her anatomy. Because sometimes I also think if people look themselves, they're kind of like, is this where the clit is? Is this where, and I'm like, it'd be kind of cool to have a professional help
show
women
you
understand their genitals better. And, that's not something that's part of the gynecology exams. There's kind of this like, I don't know if it's just our culture, but like, let's put a sheet over you and like, let's whatever. And I understand it's important for people to feel safe and, for it to feel professional maybe, but it does seem like there's an element that's maybe reinforcing like
the shame
let's not talk about it. Let's not like, tell people what's unique about their anatomy. Cause I had one provider that I'm just like being very open today. That was like, oh, let me get a longer speculum for you. So I'm like, do I have a long vagina? Have I had a long vagina this whole time and no one's told me? I'm like, why? Why would no one tell me?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And even my gynecologist colleagues tell me a lot of gynecologists don't even examine the external anatomy. They should be. They should be looking for clitoral adhesions, all kinds of things that can cause problems, but they don't. They just go right for the vaginal exam. I do have one colleague, however, who says to all her patients, would you like to look in a mirror and I'll show you your different parts?
I love that so much. And so if you're listening and you're like, yes, ask your provider, right? Because they might be assuming that most of their patients are uncomfortable. But if you show like, hey, I want to know, then I bet they will look. I bet they will help you out.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've had the honor lately. I've been presenting to a lot of physician groups, grand rounds, and they have like almost no training in sexual health. It's insane.
No.
But they're often the first line of defense for people.
They are. And I think it's important for people to know that too. And when I published my audio only episode on the clitoris, there was a doctor in my Facebook group that was kind of a podcast related thing. We'd gone to college together. And he was like, I literally learned more from your episode than from my gross anatomy class.
Oh my gosh.
Like publicly commented that on my Facebook.
That's amazing. Well, good for you. Oh,
good for me, but also like,
good for you, bad for them. Yes, exactly. I meant like good for you that you're even, you're reaching people to educate them about really important things. Yes.
Right. Yeah. So it's kind of important for people to realize that like, your average doctor is not going to really be able to know much. And you really probably do need to talk to, I would say either a gynecologist or like a pelvic floor PT maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which they're out there. And I mean, some people listening might not have even heard of pelvic floor physical therapy. I think it's starting to gain a little bit more popularity or a little bit more awareness, but I think
and it's what an orgasm is, right? It's the same for a penis and a vulva. The blood flows in, it's filled, the erectile tissue fills up, And then then the blood is released through rhythmic contractions of the pelvic floor. So having a strong pelvic floor is going to make orgasms feel better, although too strong a pelvic floor can cause pain. So people shouldn't just be running around doing Kegels, especially if they have pain. But a couple appointments with a pelvic floor physical therapist, they can really teach you how to do these exercises. And it's good for urinary, health. It's good for so much.
So much. So yeah, just go. Also, it's related to back pain. I think it was like 95% of back pain has a pelvic floor component. So, if you have back pain, if you have like leaking when you do jumping jacks, if you have a hard time orgasming, like go check it out. If you have premature ejaculation, go check it out. Like it can help with so many different things. And a lot of people just aren't aware of it. And these people are so comfortable with sexual organs because they do it all day. And so it tends to be a very safe, comfortable space.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that could be another way of knowing your anatomy. Okay. And then the next thing you mentioned was thoughts. This is obviously a big one, but
huge.
Yeah. Explain to people, how does your thinking actually impact your ability to orgasm?
Well, your brain is actually like your biggest sex organ. The book by Beverly Whipple, The Orgasm Answer Guide, says the brain is the conductor of the orgasm orchestra. And I really love that. But your thoughts influence you in a couple ways. One, subconscious sex negative thoughts, which many of us carry with us because we were raised while we're sexualized, it's a sex negative culture.
It is.
So sex is dirty. Sex isn't important for me. Sex is just my job to please my partner. If I have sex and enjoy it, I'm a slut. So many sex negative thoughts. So getting in touch with what those are that you're carrying, and then finding a way to say stop, no, and a more positive thought like sex is for me, I can enjoy sex, etc. So that's really important. And then that mindfulness thing, like so many times our bodies are one place and our mind is somewhere else. Now, that's natural. That's what our minds do. They go forward, they go backwards. They're rarely in the same place. Like someone listening to this podcast, as interesting as we're being, right? Their mind may have wandered 15 times during the listening.
Likely. Yes.
And that's okay. That's normal. It's human. But mindfulness is noticing as quickly as you can when that happens, not judging where your mind went, and pulling it back to your body. I love the metaphor of a roller coaster. Whether you like it or not, if you've ridden one, when you get on, you're like, oh, your thoughts are racing, right? Like, is this going to go upside down and get stuck? Am I going to vomit? But once you're flying downhill, you're not thinking at all. Your mind and body is in the same place. And that's mindfulness. It takes a lot of practice, cultivated in daily life. You can meditate. You can do yoga. You can also just do it in daily activities. The next time you're brushing your teeth, when your mind wanders, bring it back to the sensations. And we know it's really essential for orgasm because the latest brain research shows that the brain state right before orgasm is identical to the brain state of deep mindfulness meditation.
What? Really?
So, yes. So to have an orgasm requires turning your brain off.
Okay.
It is a you cannot orgasm unless you turn your brain off. Now, they're not sure if orgasm itself turns it back on or if it turns on after, but that's what the latest brain research shows. So meditate. I would say meditate, lubricate, vibrate.
Can you get a t-shirt that says that on it?
I would love that. Oh, we should make that. Yes.
Yeah. I do want to have a merch line with some like sexual puns, but also things like that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. One day we'll get there. Okay. So then what about sexual communication? So this is where I see a lot of the people that I work with get stuck where, they kind of have this like good friendship in their relationship. They've been together for a long time. Maybe they just don't talk about sex because they're uncomfortable, or maybe they talk about it and it just tends to not go well. Like someone gets really triggered.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that if people, Corey Silverberg has a great line. I promise you that it's easier to learn to talk about sex than it is to learn to read minds. So
Like
you
that.
know, and we can't teach our clients to read minds, but we can teach them to talk about sex like they would any other topic. And we know from the research, right, that the more you talk about sex, the better sex you have.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, really, there's a whole set of skills, but the bottom line is start to talk about sex outside of the bedroom. What do you like? What don't you like? What could we
Yeah.
do different? Talk during. It's okay. Faster, slower. How about right there?
Mm-hmm.
Like, talk after. How was that for you? And don't get all wigged out if it was better for one than the other. That's normative, you know, and then, you know, have what I call clitorisy chats.
Oh,
Sit
I
down
love that.
together, talk about the type of clitoral stimulation you need, watch some movie together, like, or a sex positive site like OMG Yes,
Yeah,
or
I love that one.
read a book together on clitoral stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, have the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's so important too. And I mean, you can also state your preferences. Like, if you don't want the feedback during sex and you want it after, or you want it before when it's not a sexual context, like, communicate about your communication preferences.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have two more. So changing the script. That, and I've done some episodes about kind of unlearning sex negativity stuff. But yeah, what do you think is like the default script, and what, like, how
The
do,
default
yeah.
script is foreplay just to get her ready for intercourse, male orgasm, sex over, and changing that script so clitoral stimulation, penetration are equally important. So she comes first, she comes second, or if you come together again, often you need to use your own hand, a vibrator, a couple's vibrator. There's cock rings with attached clitoral
Mm-hmm.
vibrators, etc. So, you know, just let go of this idea that sex is like a staircase. We start
I
with kissing,
know.
then we move to this, with,
Yeah.
you know, intercourse, the final stair. And it's much better if it's more a sharing of pleasure and a giving and a taking, and not trying to get to the top of the stairs.
It's like sex is over whenever you guys decide it's over. Like,
Exactly.
whoever it is that you're with.
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
and yeah, I think it kills creativity. Like, I think especially in, a longer relationship, but really even in shorter ones, if you're always just kind of doing the same stuff in the same order, you're probably gonna get kind of bored anyways.
Absolutely. Great point. Yes.
Yeah. So, like, I think that's what some of the unlearning the script or changing the script could look like. Is you could even play with, okay, let's just take penetration off the table for a little bit and see what we can come up with.
Exactly. And in fact, Peggy Kleinpetz wrote a book, I don't know if
Oh,
you've
I
read
love
it, called
her. I
Magnificent
did
Sex.
love that one. Yeah.
And, you know, it was really about people who are having great sex. They said their best sex started at 50. Why?
Okay.
Because they could get more creative. They took
Yep.
penetration off the table for maybe medical reasons, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And they started having better sex when they stopped being so goal oriented.
I love that. And I think just as a therapist in general, being too attached to an outcome is a recipe for anxiety. And
Right.
anxiety is a recipe for no orgasms. So,
Absolutely. Yes.
like,
Yeah.
it's going to be more fun.
Yes. Mindfulness is sex's best friend. Self-monitoring, shame, anxiety are its enemies.
Yeah. So yeah, if there's someone listening who has, struggled to have an orgasm, all the stuff that we're saying is going to help you. So,
Absolutely.
know your anatomy, get a good vibrator, talk about it. But I think so that brings us to the last one, masturbation. Try it on your own, right?
Yeah. And that actually should come before even communication and changing the
True.
scripts, because first know your own body and change your thoughts, and then engage in mindful masturbation, and then talk about it and transfer it to partner sex. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And I mean, some of my clients are kind of resistant to masturbating. And I think it does go back to, feeling uncomfortable with their genitals or kind of the messaging they got. How do people kind of, I don't want to say push past that, but how do people work with that and
Yeah.
still get to a
So
point where they can
I
orgasm?
often talk to my clients about like the health benefits of masturbation,
Mm-hmm.
that there are a lot of spiritual beliefs that say the reason our hands can reach our genitals is because they're supposed to.
Yeah,
There's
love that.
lots of health benefits.
There really are.
Better sleep, better stress management, better skin
Mhm.
health, all kinds of
Blood
stuff.
flow, lymphatic system. Yep.
The whole thing, sexual health. And if clients really object, I've had clients who really object for religious reasons.
Okay.
And the source I always send them to, have you heard of Rev Bev?
No.
She's an ordained Christian minister. She's got a YouTube channel, and she uses the Bible to be sex positive. And she's got a video, and
Oh my
she's
God, I
got a
love this.
she's got a video where she talks, like she quotes Bible verses to say that actually the Bible is not against
Oh my
masturbation.
God, I love her. I need to have her on the show.
Yes. Oh, yes. She's fabulous.
That's so cool. Yeah, I'm going to refer people to that too. But I think there is just more shaming of, women's genitalia and more just like, ew, periods, or like, ooh, it could smell weird down there. And I think we also just need to realize like that's a bunch of made up crap also. And the smell is fine. Maybe if there's like an infection going on, it's not. But otherwise, the smell is fine.
Right. All those products, douches, scented pads, they're really bad for vaginal
They
health.
really
And
are.
they give you the idea that you smell bad. Vagina smells like vagina. And it's supposed to smell
Yeah.
the way it smells.
Yes.
And you should get to know your own smell so that if it changes, it might signal an infection. And then you'd need to go to the doctor.
Agreed. So that brings us back to like there are actual health benefits to doing this work, and I learned recently, because even in my sexual health certificate, most of this is not taught, to be fully honest.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I think it's just way too academic. I think it's way like, oh, here's so-and-so's model of psychosocial sexuality or something. And I'm like, okay, but like,
yeah,
probably
no,
not
like,
going to
let's
bring
make
this
it
up.
real. Yeah.
Right. Like with the client. So yeah, I would, at some point, I'm like, I would love to have my own little sex school training thing. But, yeah, there's so much to learn, even just like hygiene with genitals, the idea that you don't want those scented products and that can mess up with your, pH, or cause bacterial issues or something. And you really want fragrance-free body wash just on the outer labia, and really just water inside.
Exactly.
When you're washing. So I just like want people to know how to properly take care of themselves too. And I'm
exactly.
Why is that not taught?
I don't know.
You guys, we're just like on a mission. We're going to fix this. So share this episode with people, because like nobody knows this information, and like everybody should be knowing this. But I just want to say thank you to Laurie. And where can people find you? Where should we send them? You have so many resources.
The best place, like my central hub, is my website, which is www.drlauriemintz, DRLAURIEMINTZ.com. From there, you can order, link to booksellers like Amazon, Barnes and Noble to buy my books. You can follow me on social media, but my handle is the same on all social media: Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, Dr. Laurie Mintz, and I'm most active on Instagram.
Yeah. You guys check out her book. Like, Becoming Clitorate is just, I think, like a must read for everyone, regardless of gender. So it's a great way to even bring up the conversations with your partner, because this is why I love like books, articles, podcasts, because it's neutral. It's like nothing's pointed, nothing's targeted at them. It's harder to get defensive. And it's a great way to just kind of listen or read something together and start a conversation. So thank you so much, Laurie, for being here. I hope everyone enjoyed this, and we'll catch you next week.
Thanks for having me.